So now moving on to the LTP 2021 programme update for June 2020, item 8. And again, I'm sure, Peter, you're going to describe to us a highlight here, which is that this programme has not been affected to anything like the extent we might have anticipated by the lockdown and by COVID. And I guess, you know, I welcome that news particularly because I know that a number of the staff that are working on LTP are the very same people who've been working evenings and weekends and many hours on take 2 of the annual plan, and also are people that for 7 weeks were working from home, and of course we all know what that feels like. So yeah, Peter, I'd welcome some comments on that and other matters. Over to you.
Yeah, look, it is worth noting that a lot of the people that you just referred to were working simultaneously on the services they deliver and the second annual plan and the LTP during lockdown. So that's quite a pile. And we're talking about dozens of people there, not one or two individuals. So it really is worth just taking a moment to think about what those people produced during that time. The impact, we've maintained momentum on the project and hit the deadlines despite all that. The exception, of course, is the financial strategy, which inevitably is knocked sideways by the annual plan decision making on financials. You can't do the LTP till you know what the annual plan is. You need to know where you're starting from. So that's the one exception that is beyond staff's efforts. They can't circumvent that. So look, just moving back for a moment, recently the Chief Executive gave a briefing in the Gallery Amphitheatre to key staff, and part of the focus there was to lift the game on resilience, risk and climate change in the building blocks of the LTP. They exist. The initial reading of them, and remember they're meant to be a solid draft, not final, is that the content's there and it's solid, but it's a little bit BAU, and that we're looking for stronger support for those staff around building in resilience, risk and climate change into their planning. Now with 6 months to go, that's eminently achievable, but it was a little waypoint reminder that the Chief Executive delivered quite firmly. That we also need to be very clear in our responses to COVID-19. So in other words, BAU doesn't cut it there either. But as I said, the 1st of June deadline was achieved. That stuff is all sitting on Big Tin Can for you. That stuff has been there for several months now, but it's only really swimming into sharp focus now. We are ahead of other councils, many of whom were blown out of the water by the lockdown. And we're also ahead of our own schedule. I mean, this time in 2018, nothing had been built. We now have an infrastructure strategy. We only began building it in June of 2017. So we're well ahead of the game, but that also means it's ours to lose if we let that opportunity slip by. On the 30th of June, we had that discussion. You might remember about the overall parameters, so rates, debt, headroom, all of those overall parameters for the LTP. My sense of the room then is that we didn't quite land exactly the final result there, and I'll come back to that in a moment when I look at the schedule. That meeting was a change from previous LTPs where we've dived straight into the building blocks of activity plans. This time we've decided to take a more global discussion first, and I think probably another one is required. The external advisory group has been meeting fortnightly. They're going hell for leather. They've reviewed a lot of documents and talked to a lot of staff, and they'll have their first briefing with you on the 15th of July. That's in keeping with the lessons from the last LTP, which were little, early and often beats late and last in the process. Now, if you'll just turn to the attachment, which is a schedule of briefings. These have largely been locked in. The issue that I'd like to raise this morning is that, okay, you have the combined briefing from the infrastructure strategy, finance and capital on the 7th. After that, the intention was to move into the activities. I believe that on the basis of that meeting of the 30th where we talked about overall parameters, that probably another conversation needs to happen in that space. The idea being that we really have a good understanding of the overall blueprint of what you want the LTP to look like and what you want the consultation document to be like at the end. If we understand that well in broad terms, we can then dive into the weeds and the detail. But if we go there first, we run the risk of working through each activity, getting to the end of it and saying it's too much. And then we're in a late, frantic scramble again. So a little bit more time. Honestly, the situation in very simple terms is like a house owner and the builder. You really, as the builder, you really want an understanding of what kind of house the customer wants. And we made a lot of progress on the 30th, but I think, and I might lean to the Chief Executive here, that we didn't quite stick the landing on the final detail. Is that a fair summary?
It is.
Okay, so what I'm proposing is that we push out those activities. We don't change the meetings because it's been an extraordinary process to get them locked in. We'll simply change the topics and push out that first activity around the gallery and museums, which was chosen because it's relatively small and easy. It's a good starting point for the newer councillors. Push that out and have another discussion around the overall expectations of the Mayor and councillors for the overall LTP and what the consultation document should look like. Is that a fair proposition?
I think that reflects, Peter, quite well some of the output from the meeting on the 30th. I think it also reflects the fact that we want to have an overview of the work that needs to be done, particularly in the areas that you've described. We want to have an overview of that, set some overall expectations, take a strategic approach. We want to be ambitious. We want to make sure that we're spending our time looking at those parts of the plan where our time is most valuably spent, and identifying those parts of the work that needs to be done, which probably will bear less discussion, so that we can spend the time on the matters that really matter, where we can actually take a different approach and make the most positive difference. So, I think you've picked it absolutely right. Coming out of that high-level discussion on the 30th, taking a little bit more time to plan the process and the approach will mean we get a whole lot more value from a sensible approach to these sessions, rather than, and certainly casting my mind back to the way we've done this in the past, trawling through a lot of information, some of which may have more value to us than others in terms of realising our ambitions.
Okay.
So just to add to that as well, Chair, is the opportunity, and I know that's the ambition of the Mayor, is how do we turn this LTP into transformational LTP? We're hearing some of the historical challenges around investment. If we don't actually think about this stuff to change that at this point, those challenges will remain in the long term and will continue. So there are some important strategic questions that you will have and we will have, and we need to think those through to be able to get us in a position whereby we've got the right foundation stones to build the LTP properly. We won't get it 100% right. We're trying to shift the tanker, but I think we can get a long way.
Thank you. So, Peter, that was your introductory remarks. Are you happy to take some questions?
Yes, please.
Yeah, all right. Are there any questions on this report? Yanni.
Thanks. Have you got a list of work that was requested as part of the LTP that you're tracking, e.g. formal requests from council for work to inform what we're doing, e.g. implementation strategies, Section 70A reviews, and I did have a specific one I'd raise, but I just was interested in that higher general kind of question first.
We are compiling a list of items that have been raised since 2018 at any point that may not have been addressed, or that have not been addressed and have been basically parked for the LTP. We're doing a sweep of all the documents since then to look for any outstanding actions and tot them up into a list and bring them back to you as part of the LTP.
Yeah.
To say, look, back in 2018, 2019, this was raised, it hasn't been addressed. Now is a good time to clean house on all of those historical legacy ones.
So things like our integrated water strategy, things like the implementation plan for that, is that going to be provided as part of the report that we get on water services, for example?
No, it normally wouldn't be, because we're asking in this instance, the water area to spell out what they're going to do, how they're going to do it and when, but not necessarily all the operational detail below that. So if you wanted that information, you would ask when that plan is put in front of you, where's this other stuff?
So, well, that's what we did. So we gave a time frame of 6 months to get that work complete once we adopted it. But I've never seen that work. And my understanding was, I mean, I've raised this repeatedly. We've done a whole bunch of strategies that have no actions, that have implementation plans that are going to be developed as the next step. But I never know when we actually get to see those implementation plans in terms of what it means for budget. And so I'm really kind of puzzled by that.
Well,
but maybe we can get some clarity. Don't need to get an answer straight away.
I understand your question better now, and the simple answer to that is when a plan comes in front of you and it says, here are the outcomes we're trying to achieve, here are the outputs we're going to deliver, here's the budget we need. The question is simply, where is the implementation plan in all of that?
So often what we get told is there's no budget because the budget will be done as part of the implementation plan. And councils be well aware of me raising this every time we've adopted a recent strategy. What's the budget implication? And we're told, nil. Art strategies are classic. We're going to do all this stuff, but there's no budget implication. And then we're told that so I just think we need to get some thoughts around that so we can be really clear. And then very specifically, where there's been very, very specific requests as part of the 17A review for work to be done around, like, for example, the Linwood Library, that was really clear with time frames when we considered it, but staff have now come back and said they're not doing it. And at what point at a governance level do we overturn a governance decision if staff are not doing what we've asked? I don't quite know how that interface works.
I'm sorry, you've caught me with a bit off guard.
That's a very, it's a very specific question.
No, it is. So you look at the schedule. We've got libraries coming as part of the LTP process.
Yep.
Right? And they're doing Section 17A reviews as part of that. And we'd previously asked that, or were told that it would be done for Linwood Library, that would be done under Section 70A of the Local Government Act to inform the next LTP. The review will be completed by May 2020 for the executive leadership team input and be presented to Council in early June. Work will be commenced in the new year. You've now been told that, this is from the Chair, the service review of the future delivery of Linwood Library does not fit well within the framework of the Section 17A review process. The library is currently undertaking 3 Section 70A reviews, which are close to completion. Once they are completed, Libraries and Information will undertake analysis of future option for the library service. So it's a completely different thing than what we were told. And I just don't know, as elected members, how our decision making fits into either things that have been asked to be happening, not happening, or things being changed.
Yeah. So
and that's what I was trying to understand. So for the briefing that comes when libraries comes back, is that the time that we go, you're supposed to do this, you haven't done it, then we're going to run out of time, and that's what worries me.
Well, but what you just said is correct. The 17As are meant to come back with the activity plan to reinforce the information in it and potentially inform it of any transformation that's to occur around governance or delivery or whatever. Council made the decisions about what will be reviewed under 17As. It's made that decision several times. If someone elects to not conduct one, they really need to come back to Council and tell them that.
Well, okay.
So if there's a specific example, as in Linwood, that needs to be followed up there, then let's do that, and let's make sure that that's done well in advance of us considering the libraries as part of the LTP development. And if there's something that needs to be done, then let's make sure it's done. If there's a good reason why a thing hasn't been done, then let's understand that, so that we've got this discussion resolved before we get to the libraries discussion as part of LTP development.
Decisions on 17As can only be made by Council.
Yeah, and Yanni's point, decision on not to conduct a 17A when a decision has been made by Council, what's the process for that, and has the process been followed correctly in this case? Let's pick that up offline. I'm aware of the email trail that you're talking about, not least because what you quoted was an email from me to you.
Yeah, and you've seen the original.
And we'll pick it up.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Are there any further questions on this report? Melanie?
Is there any way to involve like stakeholder groups like the youth or other groups like multicultural in this process, maybe around where the community boards get a briefing or something like that?
We're going
So
to.
they're involved earlier on rather than once we put out the consultation document.
You might remember on the 30th I mentioned that there had been quite an extensive game changer engagement plan built for the LTP with focus groups, so communities of interest, better social media, interactive tools around budgeting and participation, and that all got blown away by the lockdown. The budget is still sitting there to run the focus groups, and there were some of the ones mentioned were youth, aged, but it's the usual spread of communities of interest. That money's still sitting there. The comms people who are running it are well aware of it. We're just looking to get back up again, basically get through the annual plan and get through the beginning of the LTP and then kick that whole thing over. But what it made clear to me was that March is a hell of a long time ago. Everyone's forgotten, and that we need to bring comms back into the room for them to spell out their engagement process, which has a lot of new elements in it, quite different to the traditional council approach.
So I suggest we do that on the 14th of July so you can see that, which is very imminent.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? All right, so I'm happy to move the recommendation that's in front of us. Jimmy Chen will second. Any debate? All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you. Thanks very much indeed, Peter. And also thank you to the staff that were referred to earlier in the presentation, who have been working on a number of projects at the same time. I mentioned, evenings and weekends and in very difficult and trying circumstances, so it's certainly appreciated. Thank you.